And now I get to introduce our featured poet, Clare Best. And Clare Best writes poetry, libretti, memoir, essays, and reviews. She thrives on collaborating with visual artists, composers, and musicians. She has published three full collections of poetry, as well as several pamphlets and collaborative works. Exhibitions by Waterloo Press in 2011 was a finalist for the Seamus Heaney First Collection Prize in 2012. Her most recent collection, Beyond the Gate, by Warple Press 2023, has been described by Mab Jones in Poetry Wales as a satisfying book of very finely written, deeply affecting poems. Claire's groundbreaking prose memoir, The Missing List, was a finalist in the MS Lexia. I hope I pronounce. I never quite know how to pronounce it, but I think MS Lexia Memoir Competition 2015, and was published by Linen Press in 2018. She has held residencies in settings as various as Woodlands Organic Farm, the University of Brighton, and HMP Shepton Mallet. In 2020 she held a fellowship at Guildhall School of Music and Drama, where she co-created chamber operas and song cycles. Claire has worked as a fine bookbinder, a bookseller, and an editor. She teaches creative writing for the Open University and is a tutor for the Arvin Foundation. She lives in East Suffolk between Turnstall Forest and the coast. And Claire, we have a ritual here at Poetry Lit where I follow this introduction always with a reflection, a personal reflection about the poetry of the poet in question. And here's my reflection to your work. Um, to me, this is grounded poetry in the most literal and best sense of the word, a poetry of boots and fields and earth and fruits and trees. These are poems that celebrate being rooted, but also celebrate the bearing of fruit in all its forms. For the attention to detail, um, to growth and line and track, is there to help us break through to something more hidden, something deeper. Especially in the poem Beyond the Gate, I am drawn in by all those trees as they're named, and everything I ever knew about them springs into being in my mind, almost like Robert Graves's tree alphabet he mentions in his book The White Goddess. And like trees, these poems work the nutrition they find in the ground into a marvelous magical fruit. And the other tradition we have over here at Poetry Lit is that I ask a question, and you know the question that's coming, and it's not an easy one, but so far all the answers have been quite interesting. So the question I ask poets this year is, how can poetry change the world? And I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, it's thank you so much for that lovely reflection as well, Mila. So grateful. I mean, it's an impossible and a fascinating question because I suppose as poets and readers of poetry, we're constantly asking why we do that. I know I am always asking why I read it, why I try to write it. Um, so I suppose, I mean, my first answer is subtly. How can poetry change the world subtly? I mean, I think it is subtle. I think it takes time. Poetry is not, in my mind, of the kind of time that we live by. So I think, and I also think poetry is everywhere. It's not just in poems. So I find poetry in art, in sculpture, in the world around me, obviously, in painting, in drama, just everywhere, and in music very much. And I think that as we respond as individuals, poetry is a place where we can dwell with really challenging subjects, where we can actually stay for a moment with the impossible question or the terrible image or the the pain of something or the joy of something. And to me it's about that dwelling and sometimes gaining insight. So it feels like a place of delight and a place of language, obviously, and thought, but places we can explore those things. And I think if we go beyond the individual in a way, I think poetry really can facilitate communications between us. So, why are we always being asked, what poem would you really want to read at a wedding or at a naming ceremony or a funeral? And we exchange these things like tokens, really. And I think that can be a very life-changing exchange and communication, the sort of swapping of wonderful, wonderful poems that we love. I mean, other things that struck me about this question, it can change the world because we can internalize it, because poems are kind of containable and memorable very often. They're designed to be remembered, they're concise, and so we can kind of make our own inner libraries, each of us. And that feels to me a really important way of altering my world, and a way that can then spill over to kind of alter other people's worlds a little bit. And it's, to me, it's like a dart. A good poem goes from my heart to your heart, or from your heart to my heart. And so it's a heart to heart thing. And of course, it can be and is political on so many levels, not just political poems, but the politics that we find in the layers of poetry, the layers of meaning. So those were a few of my thoughts about the potential for changing the world. I'm not sure I know how to express it otherwise, but I think there is lots and lots of potential.
Well, thank you for your thoughtful answer. There's so much in what you said, and I think what I thought was when you mentioned dwelling, it's like, and there I see sort of the relationship between the poems that you're writing and the
Mm.
groundedness and the being. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that segues very nicely into the poems you'll be reading for us now.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with a few poems from my most recent collection, which is Beyond the Gate, which is here. It was published in 2023. And I've chosen a number of poems which all in some way or another relate to walking or movement, but specifically walking. So the first is called Lark Walk February. And the setting, the landscape setting, is of my beloved Sussex, where we no longer live, but where I lived for 20 years. And it's a particular place on the South Downs where I lived and used to run and walk regularly. Lark Walk, February. All the boundaries of the field lean in, tangled hawthorns, lines of listing trees. A dropped gate off its hinges rests on slack wire at the join of path and track. Tufts of caught wool flicker with the wind. Even the uneven ground leans in, pressing into air that presses down. All the boundaries of the field lean in until the field becomes the world, contained within this place of chalk and green, while here and there larks go up, 5, 6, rising far enough to start a song, then sink to stay on winter ground. And to my current landscape place of living now, where we moved in 2018, so already 7 years ago. And when we first moved here, we had only kind of outsider's knowledge. And I gave of the geography and of the sort of lay of the land. And I gave to my husband a very old map. And for a while, it was the only map that we had to find our way around the county of Suffolk. And the poem is called Using Greenwood's Large-Scale Map of the County of Suffolk, 1825, to Find My Friend's House. Slow through rain and murk, down School Lane, past the gate to Captain's Wood, left on Ferry Road, left again by Red House Farm, and then a mile of Roman road and sandy track. Back 200 years, along dotted lines, between black ditches, over wooden bridges, to the very edge of the eastern reaches. Fields dissolve. The settle of shingle almost audible. Somewhere close, an invisible river lags its silty way through marsh and curlew country. He calls it his lonely house, this place at the land's precarious rim. I hear him slide the bolt of the old oak door, see him standing tall in a shutter of light. I love figs, and luckily I don't have to walk very far to find them because we have a fig tree in the garden. And this poem is actually shaped like a fig. Late fig. Midwinter gift hangs in thin air. After a fig summer when I learned to gorge figs and goat's cheese and honey with bread rich as Christmas pudding, long summer of squeezing lemon moons over fine fig slices to make fig flesh bleed, then feasting on it, lemon reddened. After that, I fear disappointment. But this single fig surpassing fig has fully perfect unsplit satin fig skin, purple green, darkly tender. I reach up and the gift gives slightly to my carefully cultivated fig touch. Does not resist a fig knife, cutting it against white porcelain. This precious late fruit proves super fig charged, with intricate red, pink, and butter-coloured ravelled riches, and there, at its centre, a mysterious, shady hollow, the very heart of figness. So someone else is walking in the next poem. It's really a poem which inhabits the memory of that small person who walks through my present tense. And the title of the poem is My Son's First Leather Boots. It's not the memories they evoke. There are plenty, but I won't list them here. They might escape. It's not the number 25 stamped on the instep next to a little box that says start right, nor the crusts of mud stuck in the treads 24 years. It's not scuffed toes, heels worn down in one particular place, not deep creases at the ankles where brown polish lingers. Even if I cherish details, it's not those. It's this. I have to close my door, sit quietly and alone with love and mystery. So this is the last in this group, and it's a poem that is based on trees that are, I have observed in the forest where I live and where I walk daily. But the forest is also in the poem, the forest in the poem is also a universal one. It's not always easy or safe for women to walk, especially alone. And so this poem, Beyond the Gate, is dedicated to the memory of Sarah Everard and all the others. Beyond the Gate. Scots pine and resin-scented air out here. Giant oak next to the path we are walking. Sycamore in sun, in shade. Holly crowding ragged elder. Sweet chestnut, spruce fir, Douglas fir with us. Field maple, half uprooted beech out here, walking. Sorbus domestica, the service tree, and elm, rare elm. Blackthorn, black with sloes, with us out here. Hawthorn, hazel, leaning ash, and we are walking. Ivy, juniper, cherry, poplar, copper beech and twisted willow. So many hornbeam, so many birch out here, stripped leafless by fine sleet as we are walking. Ranks of cypress, sapling larch, branches creaking high above, wild plum and wild pear we are, scarred, black-leafed, still with fruit, walking, walking.
Thank you, Claire. That was wonderful. And I suspect Stephanie will have some questions to dive into with you. And if you are in the audience and you have questions as well, drop them in the chat. I will keep an eye on those. And when there's time, I will ask or have people ask their questions. But Steph, you first. You're muted, Steph.
Before I start, can I ask how many open micers we have?
One.
Okay, I can time my questions by that then. Thank you, Claire, for a wonderful reading. We're doing the Q&A in two parts. Those of you who came late are just explaining that. Walking. As you said, Claire, most of these poems are about walking. This is obviously very important for you. And all these poems are so finely observed. Caught wool flickering on wire, for instance. How much is written on the spot in the landscape? Or do you take notes, or is it all memory? And how much do you spend writing in tranquility later?
Yes, always interesting. It does vary. I used to take a notebook always when I walked any significant walk, but now I use my phone, the notes on my phone, and I quite often just jot something in there. I also take a lot of photographs, and I mean a lot. I'm a slightly obsessive photograph taker, and that sort of practice really helps me to remember what I've observed and to bring it back. And I don't know, some people find that if you take photographs, you don't kind of have that memory in, but I'm a very visual person and I find it reinforces the visual memory. So it's a combination of notes and photographs on walks. And what I've always found is that it's actually quite difficult for me to write, except when I'm away from a place. So I'll often write, like the poems, I write in faraway places. I can never write until I'm home again. And that was true of the poems that I wrote when I was a writer in residence in Lincolnshire. I could write notes there, but I could never write the poem until I got back to Sussex. So I seem to need that distance in order to start kind of seriously working on them. But the notes often find, some words and phrases find their way right through the process, from the early notes to the finished piece. So yeah, I'm slightly, it's variable. The practice is variable, but that's kind of what I tend to do. And I just love looking at things. I look at things. It's kind of my job.
I also noticed that you're concerned with boundaries. You say the join of path and track. And in a different poem, the lonely house at the land's precarious rim. It's as if it's where nature, the physical, and the spiritual meet, nature being a subliminal space. What is more important to you, the physical reality or the mystery beyond?
Oh, that's tricky. I don't see them as separate. So I think that everything that we observe, I observe around me, it is like can be drilled down and down and down. And I think that on one level that feels quite dangerous, because it feels like there's no end to where you can look and how you can look and how you can see and listen and actually experience something in the world. But to me that feels like that's the truth. So I don't separate them in my mind.
And I was amused that even with your son's walking boots, you prefer the mystery.
Yes, I think sometimes I think it's a bit cowardly. It's almost a retreat from reality or something. But yes, I do love mystery, and I think that's a reason why I love poetry as well, because to me there is a lot of mystery that's involved with making and reading poems.
Yet you're still searching for the essence of things. I mean, in particular, your wonderful fig poem. I love the way you keep repeating fig summer, fig flesh, fig skin, fig touch. I mean, the real figness of figs is wonderfully expressed. Do you see that as a way of trying to find the essence of something?
Yeah, I think it's a playful search. I think at this stage of my life now, I realize that one very seldom finds the answer to anything really, but it's the process of looking at and looking for that is the wonderful experience of mystery, really. Yeah.
As well as wonderful luminosity in your poems, there is a darkness. I'm thinking particularly of the last poem you wrote in memory of Sarah Everard. If you hadn't put that dedication, it could have just been a lovely poem about walking through trees. I'm interested to know what gave you the idea of using a list of trees to write this poem about her.
I think it's back to the same question that you asked earlier, really. I think it's looking in the physical world for what lies beneath and beyond it. And if something starts to occupy my mind and obsess me, I know that there's something that I've got to haul from the depths, if you like. So a lot of poems just go in the bin because I can't find what the hook is, or I can't, it doesn't seem to, I can't get hold of whatever it is that's making me interested in that particular object or that thing. But the ones that I can't let go of usually come up with some kind of clue as to where they belong or what they're leading me to. And I think I can only really put it like that.
So did you write the tree poem without its dedication?
Yes, I did.
Oh.
I did. Yes. And then, in fact, it was Rob, who is here tonight, who realized, I think, knowing me well and knowing my work well, actually sort of spotted in me what this kind of dark, where the darkness was. And because I have a history of childhood sexual assault, there was something in there that was just needing me to acknowledge that. And we had a very interesting conversation about it, Rob and I.
And as you said, forests can be dangerous places for
Well,
women.
and it's that ancient trope, isn't it? And you see it in every Scandinois. The poor woman, usually, half dressed, is running through the forest with someone chasing her. It goes right back to fairy tales and deep myth and everything. Yeah. So I think the moment you the moment you have a forest, there is that potential is already there and rising.
And you do have a leaning ash, which I picked up because you also had in the Lark Walk, you had trees leaning.
Mm.
Was it that poem, I think?
Yes, I think, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and the boundaries of the field lean in. It's all a bit sinister.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all around us, isn't it? The potential for a darker interpretation.
And did you think also that trees themselves are endangered with a fear of extinction? Was that
I
there?
think that's certainly why some of the trees were included. I mean, the elm, we are lucky to have a few rare elms in the forest where I live. And of course, we know that, they and the ashes are very much threatened, and most of the trees are threatened. And I chose these trees all exist in the forest, but I picked from a longer list those which I felt had connections with aspects that I wanted to bring out, like, the service tree, Silvus domestica. It's, I wanted to have that kind of connotation in there of women in service, and, to bring in the various different, slightly more double-edged meanings of things.
Turning to maybe a happier subject, your poetry is very musical, and especially the way you read it, your emphasis on where you pause. And so I wanted this second half to celebrate the poems that you've written, which have had music added to them. So here is this wonderful little book. It's called End of Season, Fine di Stagione. It's bilingual, Italian, English. It started off in publication by Coast to Coast, which Maria, I don't know how to pronounce this. Is it Isakova Bennett is famed for sewing the cover of the books. They're having real threads. So this has got a little thread at the top and the bottom, and it's a beautiful blue, like the color of lakes and the sky. And I read that the paper is actually made out of algae, which is wonderful. Claire, would you like to tell us a little about the background of this booklet, and then we will hear the poems.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
So these poems, of which I think there are 14, were written over a period of quite a long period, actually, about almost 20 years, all based on and inspired by one place, which is Canaro Riviera, which is on the northern shore of Lago Maggiore. And it's a place that my husband and I have been going for all those years and more. And which has been at times a refuge, at times a wonderful holiday. Sometimes I've been on my own with friends, whatever. So it's just a kind of continuity piece in a landscape that I absolutely love. And the poems always remained quite separate. I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't quite know what they were. And when I was at Guildhall, I realized that they wanted to be songs, or at least some of them wanted to be songs. And so I met the wonderful composer Amy Crankshaw, and we worked together on making 6 of them into a song cycle. And yeah, so that's kind of the story of the poems, if you like. So I'm going to read you the opening poem from the booklet, which also opens the song cycle, and it's called Return.
And can I just add, after this, we're going to hear that song being played, and then Claire will read the rest of her selection.
Return. If I forget these short days and cool nights, the lack of screaming swifts, I can pretend today is summer and we are here together. But cruel waves come from nowhere, tipping boats slapping harbour walls. The lake speaks to me, and I must listen. And we're now going to listen to Amy Crankshaw's setting of this opening poem of the song cycle. There are 6 altogether. And the singer that you'll hear is the wonderful Pia Rose Scattergood.
If I forget, if I forget these short days, and cool nights. The lack of screaming swifts. If I forget, if I forget, I can pretend. If I forget, I can pretend. Today, is and we are here, and we are here but cruel waves come from nowhere, tipping boats, slapping harbor walls. The lake speaks to me, and I must listen.
Return. If I forget these short days and cool nights, the lack of screaming swifts, I can pretend today is summer and we are here together. But cruel waves come from nowhere, tipping boats, slapping harbour walls. The lake speaks to me, and I must listen. The name of a mountain. The hill behind the village has no name. It should have a dozen or more. Mountain where palm trees thrive, where the Rio Canaro roars, where mules clamber over cobbles, stone curtain, shield against the north. Place of orange and lemon trees, ancient terraces, long overgrown. High land with a view to Luino, home of lake winds finding their way. Mountain of shade, mountain of dreams, dark mountain without a name. Walking. My boots are rocks, acorns for studs. Ground rises through me, rides in my gut with sweet chestnut tannin. Lake water runs in my veins, dust sleeves my bones. Fool's gold glitters my fingers and pockets. End of season, Lago Maggiore. Out in the Golfo d'Oro, the dreadlocked summer man buzzes to and fro, towing pedalos to be tarpaulined. At the hotel by the harbour, the carpets are rolled. There's one last chance to make that passeggiata along the silver shoreline towards the hollow trees, down the path spotted scarlet with magnolia seed.
Thank you again, and also thank you for sharing that wonderful piece of music. It was quite. I saw Brenda say stunning, and I think that's exactly the right word. And I think Steph has prepared some more questions on this sequence of poems, right, Steph? And again,
Yes, that's right.
if you want to ask a question, if you have a question for Claire, do drop it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that.
Claire, I think you have evoked a little bit what Lake Maggiore is like, Italy. Can you explain a bit further what inspires you about this place? And are you aware of its different culture and the language as well?
Yes, so it was a place that we landed in quite by chance, and came to love over time. And I think the landscape, I mean, there's so much water. It's such a vast lake, and the sense of ever changingness. It's more like the sea than a lake. And I'm sure people who know the North Italian lakes are aware of this extraordinary sort of scale of things. And so I'm fascinated by the absolute mutability of the landscape, particularly, the water side of it, and by the wonderful, wonderful walks that go right up into the hills along these old mule tracks, which over the years since we've been going there have been opened up. There weren't many 30 years ago, but now you can walk up through the hills on a vast number of these different mule tracks. So it's kind of the place where I feel that water and rock meet, if you like. So maybe it's another of these kind of boundary, feelings that I sense there's almost this kind of tensional battle between the rock and the water, and certainly the people and the culture of the place is one of historically is one of, you know, significant struggle, and a lot of poverty going right back. So it feels like a very complex love, really. It's a passionate love affair with a place that has been based on getting to know it slowly over years. I have some Italian. It's very rusty now, but I learned it sort of, you know, in my teens, and I learned it by speaking rather than learning it on paper. So actually, for a while, was a better. I had a better command of it than I did French, which I had learned as a sort of literary, from a literary angle, as it were. So it touches a lot of nerves, and I think for my partner, my husband too, who lived in Italy for a while, way back, and it is a place that has become a kind of home in a way. But we feel very pleased to visit always, and the mutability sort of seems to contain our mutability and our aging, and I think that that's a wonderful way of being in a place.
Benissimo. I was wondering, you said that you wrote the poems first, and then Amy wrote the music afterwards. But what did you learn from her while you were collaborating?
It was wonderful to be able to actually go there with her. So we went just at the end of the pandemic was still, you know, things were still masked up, and very much you had to have every pass with you when we went there together. And we talked a lot about what it meant to me and the place and how she was responding to it. So it felt really, really vital for her to experience the place. And she's a person who composes a lot of music around a great respect for the natural materials of landscape. And so for her to work with the water, the rocks, the leaves, it was a total experience. And she's a runner as well, so she would take off up the mule tracks running. I was left well behind, and I think, you know, that kind of mutual experiencing of the landscape was very much where the music kicked off from, and endless discussions about the images and the poems, and then it was a kind of long process of deciding which ones to choose for the song cycle. And so it was although the poems were finished by that point, I had worked on them as songs, which sounds slightly strange because I can't compose music, but I knew that they wanted to be songs, and I had pared them down, and had a particular kind of ear for how they might become songs, and which vowel sounds might work and which wouldn't, and, you know, where they should begin and end. So I was kind of already on the path to making them songs, and then Amy so generously joined me on that path, and, you know, we carried on together. So it was a really exquisite collaboration, and one I've valued hugely. And there was also something about going back at that moment when Italy was just opening up, in March. It was March 2022, I guess, and seeing the place almost with completely fresh eyes, because everything had been closed, you know, for a long time, and of course they had it so badly there. So there was that as well. It became quite symbolic for both of us of a kind of a reopening, and a moving ahead.
I'm interested in what the difference is if you had not written words first. Like, for instance, when you held your fellowship at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in 2020, and you wrote 3 chamber operas. What was it like there? Did you hear the music first, or how does the collaboration work?
So, yeah, so one of the operas I wrote or worked on was also with Amy. That was the first. It's called The Apothecary, and everything was completely collaborative right from the start. So we worked on everything about the storyline, about the characters, about the how characters would interact. That was all work that we did together. It was inspired by a poem by Robert Browning, but that was just the kind of seed, the kick-off point. And then very slowly I began to sketch scenes. I decided to work with that opera. I worked with quite a lot of rhyme for certain of the characters, which I set myself as a challenge to do. And of course, it also set Amy a great challenge, because writing music to cope with rhyming poetry is challenging, to put it mildly. So, there were a lot of points where we conferred very, very closely. And then once I was kind of in the flow, I got a first or second draft out, and then we worked on the whole thing from that point. And when it came to her music, we also worked very closely together. She would send me little samples on WhatsApp messages and say, I've had this idea for this bit, what do you think?
And did you sometimes have to rewrite what you'd done?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Because of her music?
Yeah, absolutely. And also because of the way that the sort of the demands of a chamber opera, which is only really, in this case, 25 minutes, there's you have to have room for arias, but you've also got to fit in quite a lot of happening, as it were. So it's quite a balancing act. So a lot of it was done as we went.
And
right
what sort of qualities do you think a good collaborator must have?
Lots of patience, lots of open-mindedness, and a willingness, I think, to redo stuff, to make it again, endlessly, and not be dispirited by that in any way. But I find that really exciting, because I just think, a lot of the work we do as writers, as poets, is actually quite solo. And I love the excitement of working alongside somebody else with something quite fluid.
Well, obviously we don't have time to play an excerpt from one of your operas, but if anyone's interested, you can find them through Clare's website, which Clare, how does it go? clarebest.com?
.co.uk.
And would you like to tell us what you're working on now? I think you're working on a song cycle.
Oh, yeah. I'm working on, there's quite a long poem in the middle of Beyond the Gate, which is called Salting. And it's very much, it's very entwined with landscape. It's very human and physical, but it's also very landscape. And I'm working with a composer called Michael Bascom, who I've also worked with on another opera, and he's setting the poem to music for probably a mezzo voice with chorus. And we hope it will be premiered next spring, about this time next year, hopefully. And I'm really loving doing that. It's, it's exciting. It's all of those things. And it feels like on one level my work is done because the poem is written, but that is just the beginning, really.
Well, best of luck with that.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience.
No. So I was thinking, Steph, but I don't know what you are thinking, but I remember that Claire said, well, I can always read another poem, so that maybe we just sort of, if you have one ready to go, Claire, that we sort of end on that, and then we'll move to looking ahead at the next month and to the open mic.
Okay, so I thought, if this is a very different kind of journey, There's walking involved, but it's not quite so prominent. The final section of Beyond the Gate, the collection that came out 2 years ago, has a series of poems where I kind of imagine things about my own death, not in a morbid way, but in a kind of reflective way. And this poem is called Crossing the Styx in the Quiet Carriage. This was a big mistake. The quiet carriage isn't quiet. It shudders with envy, lust, neurosis, fatigue, regret, rendered more palpable by the desire for peace. Those of us who reserve these quiet seats are supersensitive. Our skins are thinner. A woman with a condescending voice insists, "Welcome aboard this great British railway service." Her words accompanied by a sonic rainbow of nose blowings, slurps, sneezes, whispers, foot shufflings, gut rumblings, crackling Kit Kat wrappers. WhatsApp alerts vie with announcements. Please leave all your belongings behind. We're approaching our final destination where this life terminates. Take care stepping down. My time here will soon be done. I'll walk into authentic silence, uninterruptible air.
Thank you. Thank you. You don't often encounter poems about death that make you laugh and grin, but this one did. And I really enjoyed, I mean, this is the first time we've ever had one featured poet read several works or several books, and I thought it was really enjoyable to sort of get peeks into different, different books and different works that you did. So thank you so much.
Thank you
And
very much for inviting me. It's been a joy.
a big hand for Clare, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I will stop the recording now.